So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this, the first of the ASFP's webinars for 2024. My name's Andrew Taylor. I'm sure hopefully many of you, if not all of you, know that already. I'm just going to wait a few minutes while people are coming into the webinar, and then we'll make a start. Okay, all right. That seems to be that the numbers seem to have settled out, and they're going up slightly slowly, but we'll make a start. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this, our first webinar of our 2024 programme. My name's Andrew Taylor. I'm head of technical here at ASFP, and I'm going to do a quick canter through, looking forward to all the stuff that we see for coming out and happening in 2024. And without any further ado, so how today's going to work. We'll have a quick welcome to the webinar. We've got a chat box which I can see. Thanks, Georgie. It's obviously working this time around. That's good. We've got a question and answer box as well there that we've got open. And if you've got any questions on the webinar as we go through, please feel free to stick them in the Q&A box. And as time allows, at the end of it, we'll try and go through those and answer as many of those as we can. So we've got the chat box, we've got the Q&A, and of course, in tradition, we've got some polls set up within this as we go through the presentation to ask you a bit of feedback and a bit of questioning, which you'll see will help us with some of the things that we're going to do. In terms of this webinar, it has CPD accreditation. And so if you want a CPD certificate as you are, and you're on this at the time that we are doing this, which is 1 o'clock on the 24th of January, then email us info@asfp.org.uk if you want a CPD certificate. This will get uploaded onto the internet there afterwards, and if you're watching us on Catch-Up TV, I'm sorry, we can't do CPD certificates for those who've watched it on Catch-Up TV, but we can do them for those of you who are here now. And I'll put that information on the thing at the end of the webinar if you want to do that. I've got someone on the chat box saying that, can you hear? I've got no sound. It was working all right before. Oh, excellent. Good. Thank you. Right. So basically, I'm going to take you through what we're going to see for the next year. We are going to look at both regulatory developments, and we're going to look at ASFP activities, and I've broken it down into 3 separate sections, 2 of which are much bigger than the third one. So we'll look at product regulations and product requirements and product certification. We'll look at installer regulations, which is a lot of which is around about competence. And we'll look at lastly at the installation. And that, of course, brings us straight away to make sure that everything's working to poll question number 1, which Sadia is going to launch now. And as if by magic, poll question 1 appears on the screen in front of you. So on that basis, can you answer us poll question 1? It's single choice in terms of what is your involvement in the passive fire protection sector, so that we can see who we've got in the audience. Okay. And the answer is, hopefully, it's a real mix. 90 of you answered, and we've got a real mix between from architects, manufacturers, testing and certification people, inspectors, and fire risk assessors. Right, thank you very much. And we'll see whether that helps as we go through. Okay, so as I've already said, I'm going to break this down into three separate areas, and the three separate areas that we're looking at in terms of how we improve building safety. Installer, which has a focus on the competence and improving third-party certification of companies. Product, better and more relevant testing and increasing the rigor of product certification. And installation, better earlier design and a more detailed record keeping of things that we see coming. And I'm going to go through each of those rings per se. And so we're going to start off, we'll start off a bit with and do a bit on product certification. So if product is our first wheel of the first of the three, probably the most significant thing that's going to happen to us that's from outside ASFP, outside is development of construction products regulations. And we'll talk quite a bit about that. And then for us, what we can do, the main thing that we can change is product certification. We need to look at manufacturer competence. We're going to talk a bit about CCPI, and we'll introduce at the end pass mark, and then the stuff that we've been doing in terms of what we're writing at the moment. Okay. You will have seen me use, hopefully you may well have seen me use this particular image, this particular slide, two worlds, two bubbles, that this is one that Paul Morell gave us and put up a while ago, and that basically the testing, assessment and accreditation and certification bodies all work in one particular sphere, but design and construction quite often works in a different sphere. And that's one of the things that we've got to come together and try and solve over the next 12 months. So probably the most significant thing that we see coming forwards comes out of the Building Safety Act, the post-Grenfell and the Building Safety Act. The Building Safety Act gave a lot of powers for the Secretary of State to make regulations regarding a number of different things, and somewhere tucked away towards the end in Section 9 is construction products regulations. A lot of our construction product regulations at the moment is stuff that we have in the UK that came out of European construction regulations that was written across by the EU exit, the Act when we EU exit, and so it's the European stuff writ across into the UK. The Secretary of State has powers to change that, and we've had some draft ideas of what they were going to do, but at the moment we're still waiting for that to come out. Niall and I have had conversations significant conversations with DLUC in the last couple of 3 months, the last quarter of last year, and we think that the new pronouncements and the new stuff should be coming out of DLUC. I've gone generous and said the first half of 2024, but I actually think it may be sooner than that. It may even be the first quarter of 2024. So we might see it coming out in the next couple of months. And what we are expecting to see is that regulation will come along underpinned by what was written in the Morell and Day report. I don't know whether you've seen this, but the Morell and Day report, or Testing for a Safe Future, as it's otherwise known, was commissioned by the government to review product testing in summer 2021, and that report was published April last year. Now, how it was produced, a lot of interviews conducted in summer and autumn 2021, and the report was published based a lot around the thinking that was present at that time. It identified a lot of things that ASFP agreed with and made a lot of recommendations for how we could improve the situation. There were about 20 headline recommendations, each of which had 3 or 4 subparts. So you've got over 80 sub-recommendations in there. One of the challenges being that many of the recommendations made were recommendations for government, some for UCAS, some for industry, but probably where our take on this has been, you know what, don't wait for government, let's see what we can do, let's see what we can deliver going forwards. Here's the next few slides. Paul Morell did a presentation, or a couple of presentations since the publication of the report, and the next few slides lean heavily on those, i.e. I've nicked bits off of what he said, to sort of explain what he thinks and where we agree with him. One of the big challenges, as we've mentioned, is the fact that the UK system basically there isn't such a thing as a UK system for testing the safety of construction products. He was asked how to improve it, and it doesn't exist. Why? Well, because the construction products regulations that we have at the moment are written around the former European construction products regulations, which wasn't necessarily written for the purpose of ensuring safety of products. The EU regs were written around free movement of goods and making sure that a manufacturer of a construction product in France could test it in Germany and then sell it into Spain, and everybody was speaking the same sort of language about how that product would behave and what that product meant, because different countries in Europe have different building regulations and build buildings in different ways. So we know that the system really isn't necessarily about safety of product. On top of that, there's a number of issues with the EU system. Failure of market surveillance and no enforcement happens. Construction products is a very complicated issue, and we don't see market surveillance and market enforcement being effective anywhere around Europe. Paul highlighted that there's no comprehensive listing of failed products, and so if a product fails a fire test at some point, there's no clear indication that that has happened. Those disappear off into the ether. There are too many AVCP systems. The process is too complicated. I'll explain a lot more detail on the next slide. So one of our big challenges is that most of our PFP product families and systems are not covered by mandatory product standard. So in actual fact, any of the European quality systems are done on a voluntary basis. We as ASFP would demand that our member, if a company wishes to be a manufacturer member of ASFP, you do it, and you do have some form of third-party certification, but it's not mandatory within regulation. Okay. And one of the highlights that Paul sort of observed was that a government likes a catchy 3 big thing headline, and we've all seen the infamous three short bullets on the lectern at Downing Street. This isn't one that's going to submit to that political will to give us a 3 catchy bump type thing that we can do to solve it. Okay. Somewhere in the middle of that slide, it mentions too many AVCP systems and the process is too complex. Okay. Well, what do I mean by that? And that's covered here on this slide. AVCP, attestation and verification of constancy of performance. Not all CE marks, not all UKCA marks are equal. We work, a lot of our systems work down here at system 1 on a voluntary basis. So the manufacturer is responsible for factory production control. The manufacturer ensures that the product behaves as it would do through its production by doing quality checks. The initial type testing, the sampling, and the testing and assessment is done by the certification body, as is an initial production audit. And the certification body returns on a regular basis to do a production surveillance. That's an audit of processes, but not necessarily of what's being produced. And so where we are at the moment is most of our product families sit here within this sort of a framework, System 1, on a voluntary basis. We'd like it to be we'd like it actually to be, probably to a certain extent, moving up and to a greater rigor, and we'd like it to be mandatory, and we'd like it to be either there or, better still, up here at System 1 Plus. And System 1 Plus means that it's all the same. The manufacturer is responsible for his ongoing QC recording, but the initial type testing, the sampling, the testing, the assessment, and the certification is done by the certification body. There's an initial inspection of production done by the certification body, and the certification body not only returns to do an audit of what the manufacturer is doing on a regular basis, but also as part of that process, they actually sample the product and check the performance of the product. And that's this box here, production sampling. You have to remember that most of our families, we say, are mandatory on this level here, System 1, but there are some of our product families that work down here at System 3, where the manufacturer is responsible for the factory production control and the sampling, but the testing and assessment is done by the certification body. Although the testing and assessment is done by the certification body, there's no follow-up at all in these boxes here. So when we look at what's in the Morel and Day report, I say it mainly mirrors what was in the draft secondary legislation in October 2021, with the key recommendation included that government should mandate that safety critical this definition of safety critical products. They're subjected to the most stringent level of conformity assessment, which is 1+, that's practical for that particular product or system, which means that we potentially, under that, we will potentially end up with this here, where we've got a thing in the middle here, where there is a new series of measures coming in, that about four product families that are outside the testing, etc., at the moment, outside the existing regulatory approach. So the existing regulatory approach, the only thing that falls into that, and that has, in our world, that has a mandatory standard, is dampers. Fire resisting and smoke control dampers have a harmonized European norm, a designated British standard. Most of our other things would therefore fall into this new series of product standards here for safety critical products. There's also going to be, and I've talked about this, a general safety requirement, which is a repurposed piece of consumer product legislation covering what we do. Paul went on a bit further. He gave us a list of things and a list of topics that he thought industry should do. So that's what these are the things, if you've read that report, that we should be doing. Okay, and we've looked at that and think, well, how can we do that, and what can we do? As a trade association, to promote compliance with all regulations, well, we're looking at this already. We've had conversations with DLUC, we've had conversations with BSI. We would work with HMG gladly to simplify the AVCP thing and increase the rigor of it. And as we said, that's one of the things we think we should do. We've been working on this to devise a series of more rigorous certification requirements, and we have a certification task group. This is a document that this is a picture here of a document that we're working on to produce that. And in actual fact, what that requires is what a manufacturer should, the requirements of a certification scheme that a manufacturer should have and should conform with to be part of a product certification scheme. And so we're working on that, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to get that document sorted very, very short order and circulate that round. what that would do is that would feed into, and some of the stuff that we're doing in that would feed into an enhanced rigor of a certification scheme. Ultimately, we'd give that to BSI and let BSI run it. But in the interim, it ties into a thing that's an ASFP pass mark. So if we can get the certification bodies to run a more rigorous to meet these minimum requirements here, then we've got that we can use that, and a manufacturer meeting those requirements would be able to use this particular mark here. Within there, it says adopt and promote CCPI. That's on the next slide. And yes, that would be in a manufacturer would be expected to be working within CCPI. And we're introducing label. Morel suggested that we introduce and labeling and traceability frameworks and golden thread standards. Well, we'll come on to that. We've got a TG already working on those and identifying those going forwards. Mentioned briefly CCPI. Code for construction product information, a set of guidelines by which manufacturers and others should have for deriving and producing construction product info. It was put forwards as a recommendation after the Hackett report. It was pushed further within Morel and Day, and that code has had favourable reviews. ASFP were involved in drafting some of the requirements. The first wave of registrations and manufacturers registering onto the CCPI and demonstrating that they could deliver that. The first wave was completed in September. It's been a long and difficult process to get there, but it's there now. There are at least, I think, 6 ASFP member companies represented in that photograph there once the launch event took place. There are future waves of registrations planned. Some of the stuff we're doing on our competence framework uses the CCPI clauses for certain activities, so it will fire up. And beyond that, the first supporters have signed up to their charters. Interestingly, CCPI's managing director Amanda Long, who's somewhere in the middle of there, or in the middle of that group, actually was in Coventry doing a podcast in our new office. Talk about that, and you'll see some pictures about that in a minute. But so the first of the new generation of ASFP podcasts will be all about CCPI, and say we will continue to promote it. Beyond that, I should mention, while we're talking about construction products, OPSS is up and running as our new construction product regulator. They're all set up and looking at things. They've been looking into 6 key product areas, including smoke control systems, including fire doors, including cladding and external wall systems. We've been working with them. They've been very, very happy at what they're doing. I've mentioned the fact that at the moment OPSS is only looking at product supply levels. So from a manufacturer standpoint, they're looking at what a manufacturer does between manufacturer and factory gate, and they're looking at misleading marketing claims and the like, but they aren't necessarily getting stuck into design and installation. But they're our new construction products regulator. They have already brought legal action against a couple of manufacturers about stuff that they were presenting, so please bear that in mind. I keep this on here. I say we are expecting construction product regulations announcement from government. That will be in response to the Building Safety Act, but it will probably also get rolled into the markings going forwards, and the CE, UKCA, switch, etc., etc. Government policy was to end. Government policy has changed about 3 or 4 times in the last 18 months. At the last change, it was to end CE and switch to UKCA with the end date of the 30th of June 2025. But we had an announcement in August that actually now we're going to accept CE marking as an alternate to UKCA in perpetuity. However, that doesn't cover construction products. And so at the moment, construction products still is due to switch from CE to UKCA at 30th of June. We're awaiting to find out what government's future intentions for construction products and regulatory marking or otherwise looks like. I would expect a significant announcement in the next 3 to 6 months. One thing that government has also been commenting on is which was they ran a consultation over 12 months ago, which closed in March, was the removal of national classifications and tests recognition of BS 476 based testing from ADB. That consultation was heavily commented on, and since when it's gone very, very quiet. Some industries we know are predominant. Fire doors is probably the most reliant on 476, whereas many industries have moved to the newer BSEN standards. Since when government concentrated on 2 staircases, and there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that there's little statistical benefit wasn't necessarily asked for in Morell and Dade, but then trying to argue against the fact that trying to argue against the emotive thing that 2 staircases has to have a level of greater safety more than 1 staircase in a tall building. In terms of, and there's been a lot of discussion about that, and letters and policy announcements and counter positions, and that's still rumbling. That particular discussion is still rumbling on. We have no idea when we'll see a formal response from on the where we're going with BS 476. We imagine again it will be some point soon, and the government is looking at it. It was promised soon, but we would see one soon. But then that promise was about September last year, and there isn't a sign of it. Interestingly, and I hadn't subtly appreciated this, but this response on this particular issue will come out of HSE and not out of DLUC. It will come out of the HSE part of the whole regulatory framework. Okay. Beyond that, one of the things that we've become aware of in terms of, and it go back to Mr. Morell's Zorb slide, is the fact that testing in construction industry doesn't necessarily work at the same speed. Standards writing is a very, very slow process. And of course, construction likes to adapt and find new ways of doing things. We've seen an awful lot of manufacturers having to test in shaft walls, as shaft walls are being used widely round construction sites, and yet they're not written into the wall standards, the fire stop standards, or anything like that. And complicated buildings like the likes of this one here, 21 Moorfields, which was constructed on top of a live tube station with a live tube station construction site of the Elizabeth line passing underneath it all at the same time. And it's a monstrously complex building with a monstrously complex design constructed in about 3 or 4 different bits. Lots of fancy stuff was going on in there that with ASFP members have been involved in. So with that in mind, one of the things that ASFP is trying to do and has started off doing in the last 12-18 months culminated in an event in November last year where we got over 50 delegates from ASFP and the Tier 1 group, the Passive Fire Knowledge group, together. We identified 3 topic areas, 3 for workshops on the day, series of presentations followed by a series of workshops, and we covered those three topics in terms of supporting construction, duct and damper design, and interfaces between structure and compartmentation. And the result of that is we've got a number of different things that we are doing. There's a number of different things that we've identified, predominantly a joint industry guide on design, checklist for installation, inspection and recording requirements. And the sort of the information that came out of that day gave us around 10 advisory notes that we need to work on, and so we're distributing that work around our many TGs, trying to do that. We've collated some data and fed that into a SEM project. A lot of people, it was quite a successful day, and a lot of people have asked me, are we doing one again at some point in the future? We have earmarked a day in May where we're thinking we may well run one, but this next event will be run at the ASFP Academy, or our new office as it's otherwise known, down in Coventry. And one of the challenges for us is basically this event runs, we pick the topics and we invite the right people to discuss with experience to discuss the topics. And at the moment, I'm not necessarily seeing a clear trend. I'm going to discuss this with the PFKG people next week, but we're trying to work out what the topics should be for that particular event. And so I'm going to bring me to poll question 2, cunningly enough, which is along the lines of what would anybody be interested in, and is there a significant body of interest in discussions on certain topics? And this is a multiple choice. These are a series of topics I was thinking of for my next industry leaders event. Is there any interest in these particular topics? I would say if any of you are out there and think there is something that from a manufacturer, an installer, a tier 1 contractor, designer should be looking at, and something that ruins your day on a regular basis, then Andrew.Taylor at asfp.org.uk would be delighted to hear about them, or stick them in the chat and the or the Q&A, and we can sort those out now. Okay. All right. Hopefully any second now this will. Here we go. So the big one there is competence requirements for fire engineers, but there's some interest in all of them apart from, oh, that's good. Okay. Interestingly, the one that came up top last time, it was design code of practice, and that's that's only got 35% of you interested in it. Right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. That's that technical question 2. Just a quick update. I'm hoping that in 2024 we see some revisions to colour books coming forwards. We've been doing some quite advanced drafting work going forwards on yellow book for structural steel. The 6th edition of that is coming out. It is hopefully will be coming out at some point this year in the next 12 months, as will the 3rd edition of the grey book, and that's both fire resistant dampers and smoke control dampers. Fire resistant dampers is volume 1, smoke control dampers is volume 2. Those drafts are getting to an advanced state. We've got a little bit more comment handling to do on yellow book, and in terms of grey book, we've got drafts that are all but ready for circulating round for external peer review. We've got a number of other things. We've got about 5 colour books going through revision and work on revision at the moment. My colleague Stuart has just revisited our TG5, which is our lightweight fire resisting petition for the purple book, and the purple book's heading towards its 3rd edition. And then we've got TGs working on 2 new colour books, the gold book, which is a guidance on the golden thread, and a clear book looking at fire resistant glazing. And I'm grateful for a couple of colleagues at Kiwa IFC for telling me that if we were working on a clear book, does that mean that all the others are unclear? So I'll let them fall out over which one of them it was that came up with it, but thank you very much. And of course, we're continuing to work on our advisory notes through our TGs. And if you want to get involved, we've got some big ones on design and indicative or ad hoc testing coming forwards, which are again coming out in hopefully in an advanced state at some point in the near future. So if you want to get involved and help us with all those, then ASFP members contact either Sadia or myself at the office, and we'll see what we can do. And beyond that, other activities in 2024, I'm continuing to support standardization committees, and we'll be continuing to work with that on behalf of our members for that. We will be running our series of podcasts in the ASFP TV. Within our new office, we've set up a little AV studio for doing these. They're in bottom right. You see a picture of Mike interviewing Amanda Long of CCPI, the first guinea pig to come into what could well be termed the broom cupboard. And we'll be that's up and running, and we'll be using that going forwards. And of course, we'll continue to do exhibitions and events with FireX, Fire Safety Event, London Build, and other web seminars and webinars as appropriate. That takes us through product and everything that's going on with product, etc., and brings us towards installer certification. So the second area, our second of our three wheels, is the installer side of things. And here we're considering this, and I'm hopefully most of you will have seen this and the competence pathway and what we're doing with that. And this is again, this will be tied into the past mark, because we will use this as part of our increased rigor of installer certification schemes. Will be tied into the thing going forwards. So you've seen this before, I hope. In terms of competence, there's a clear articulation. We need a clear set of rules as to what competence is, and we need mechanisms to develop, record, and validate that competence exists. In terms of our where we start, we are producing it says activity-based functional map. So we go through and we pull out. We've been through all the passive fire protection activities as best we can, come up with about 150, 160 different activities, from design through designing and specifying different products, manufacturing, selling, distributing, and installing different products, and then through to maintenance, own and occupy. And we've got 5 different levels that people work at. From a foundation level, I take an instruction, I understand what that instruction means, I can follow that instruction, all the way through to authoritative, where I write the rules. It will use what you would say of an authoritative person. And I'm hoping that you will all be aware, when it comes to it, if I say competence is a function of skills, knowledge, experience, and behavior, that you've all come across SCEB before now, and there should be nobody that I'm hoping that is seeing SCEB for the first time. SCEB is our standard way that we will be defining competence. That's been written large in many different documents going forward that we've been using thus far. And here are some of those documents. So what we've done as best we can in writing our competence framework is take different bits and pieces of feedback from places that are relevant, and take those texts. And if somebody's got a framework, if somebody's come up with a competence framework, can we map it so that or some guidance or some information, can we map it so that it fits in with what we're doing and how we're doing it? And for the most part, the answer is yes, we can. Now, I don't know, most of you may or may not be aware, I don't know, we have, as ASFP, we've got we work with a couple of consultants, Kate Milford and David Mara, who've helped us set a lot of this up, and they were responsible in no significant part for doing the coming out with Gas Safe and working on Gas Safe and the like. and they're now helping us with our bits. And Kate's on the HSE's Industry Competence Committee and is representing us in that forum. And a lot of their opinions on what we're doing is that we're seen as an exemplar of how to do it. And we went to David and Kate and said, go on then, how does all this work? How does this fit together? And what does what should a competence framework look like? And David went away and came back, and he came back with a mind map that looked a bit like this, which, to be honest, just it scared us. And there are lots of bits and different pieces of stuff in there. But we said, but from a simplicity point of view, let's just distill that back. And so I took that and I slimmed it down and simplified it and came up with this version, where we have a framework, a set of rules by which we define what we define competence looks like. We've got some form of training to get to that. We've got a register of what that competence looks like. And we roll that in with quality mark principles for certification of an organization. And that's all done within this. And you've seen the logo, the pass mark. That's all done within this. So, and basically, we've used this particular slide to explain what the competency pathway looks like and what practical delivery of it means. But now with the coloured blocks rolled in, to explain, to sort of give a bit of an idea. So the first thing that we do as ASFP is we write a set of rules by which and a set of statements by which the individual might show competence. And that's what's called the competence framework. So within that green, that's the set of requirements, competence requirements for each individual activity of the 150 odd activities, and we're writing those and we're going through those. Having done that, the individual can then take those requirements and hopefully record their competence and what they've done for that competence against those requirements. So the individual can take the green, do the bit, and fill in the orange. The installing organization will be responsible for making sure that the individual works with the system, uses the system, runs the system, is recording everything they're doing, and has all the relevant requirements. We write a series of quality mark principles, and then again a set of minimum requirements for third-party certification. And so we write those minimum requirements, and the certification body takes those minimum requirements and uses them for their certification scheme. And the certification scheme requirements are there. So the certification body, according to the certification scheme, checks that the organization is checking that the individual is doing what they're supposed to do in using the register to record their competence against the requirements in the framework. And then to the very, very top, we've got UCAS. If UCAS should be checking that the certification body meets our minimum requirement and is using our minimum requirements. The organization and therefore the certification body is checking the organization, is checking the individual. So if we look at that, what does the process look like going forwards for us? And here we have a quick process. We should identify, basically we start off by identifying the requirements in the framework, what the activities are, and what the competence requirements, the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the behaviour statements against each of those requirements is. Having done that, we run a consultation. We get a group together to create those statements. We consult wider, we publish them, we consult wider. And once that's done, we publish them on the website. We publish them on the website, and I'll show you where that looks, what that is and what that looks like in a minute. We then get early adopters to come along and suggest relevant training. training that's relevant to the actual how they would demonstrate the process of that. We review that training and we add that into the website so that then individuals can come along in the orange box and record their competence against those requirements, so that the employer can check that the individuals have recorded their competence, and the employer is more than happy to recommend to us where we need to go back and review all the training. Third-party certification bodies are checking the installers, are checking competence in this way, and that takes you through to the pass mark. So if we look at the process so far of those three, the three on the left, we had there, identify requirements. We started at the behest of the Industry Competence Committee and Build UK. We've done the identification of requirements for fire stopping installation, and we've got duct and damper installation underway. We have, beyond that, we've got our ASFP team. We've done design statements, we've done some sales statements, we've done some construction product information statements, and we've done some distribution stuff. And other market sectors we know we have to do. That will include, which will, I think the next ones that we are looking at will we've got doors, we've got glazing, we've got that are underway, and we are also probably looking at intumescent coatings at some point in the near, structural steel and intumescent coatings at some point in the near future. Beyond that, we have we've done what we've done. Then we do a consultation. Well, the fire stopping installation one has been consulted on, and that consultation process is finished, and we are about to start the design, sales, distribution, and manufacturer development of product info. That's about to go out, and of course, once we've done others up here, we will carry on and do more consultations to follow. And the publisher frameworks, well, the fire stopping installation framework, the fire stopping installation requirements is out, and it's sat there on the ASFP's website. It's free to access. Go and have a look at it. You will see all these different tabs across the page. Somewhere in the middle there, you've got install. If you hover over that, you will see a series of tasks underneath, and the blue ones are populated with information that you can then go into and have a look at the competence requirements for those. Which brings us back to that. So we're down here with the vast majority of stuff. In terms of, if you then consider the next 3 steps of the process, from early adopters up through to individuals record, where are we? Just to confuse you, this slide you read upwards. With the early adopters, we've got 6 early adopters for fire stopping installers identified. They have started conversations with us about where that's going, and about their training that they would use to justify that their operatives, their individual operatives, meet the SCEB statements and the SCEB requirements. Once that's done, we start a process of training recognition. The process for training recognition is identified. It works in one of 2 ways. ASFP will either recognize a program by putting a program onto our system, or recognize a training provider, in which case all their training provision is available for the system. And the recognized training provider, we've had an early adopter gone through that process, and that approval is in hand, and there is a paperwork is in. There's a committee meeting needs to be scheduled to sort that out and finalize that particular system. And beyond that, we are working with CITB to revise the national occupational standards to keep any of the NOS regulated requirements within line with our requirements and the requirements of our competence framework. And so once that's done, we open the register, and the register will be available for individuals to record their competence against the requirements laid down within the framework. The register again will be run and hung off our ASFP website for us, and we shall see that going forwards, and obviously evidencing and recording of what training has been done. So we'll work out of the ASFP's website. So that's how that will all unfold going forwards. And that brings us to the third column here, and the employer checks, the TPC checks, and the pass mark checks. And if you look at that, well, the employer checks, we're still working with the certification bodies to set limits and requirements for the installer certification, minimum requirements for installer certification. Some of these may also end up being in the product certification scheme. And that takes us then into third-party cert bodies checking the installers, and ultimately to the pass mark. But that's all, as the saying goes, off at some point back in the future. And that brings me to the end of that section. We're at poll question 3. And it's a simple one. I'm just checking this because we did a webinar on the competence thing at Christmas, and just wondering whether is there a greater number of people who've explored the framework and the competence statements on the ASFP website? So it's the same question. I think we were about 50-50 at Christmas. And here we are. And so the answer is 26% of you have been on and had a look at it. 59% of you will after today. Good, carry on. I'm sort of concerned a bit about the 16% that think that it's not something that they would need to do. But, well, we shall see. I think it is something that certainly, I think, manufacturers, installers, designers, it will cover. Eventually, it will cover inspectors and even potentially building owners for some of their activities. So please bear all that in mind. And that then takes me to, and this is a very, very simple, it's a whole one slide on installation. Basically, government has made a statement to us and said installation, you should make provision to increase the rigor of installation. Now, my main issue of this is who pays for it. Because if the client was willing to pay more for installation certification, we'd write a scheme. It's how the offshore oil and gas industry works, that there is an inspector, an inspection provider who underwrites the project, who is provided by the client, who works on the client's behalf to make sure that the installation is done properly. If not, well, we have the enhanced rigor of a QMark product with a QMark installer, where we're increasing the certification requirements. We've got competence records. We've got hopefully full auditable golden thread install records. Is that enough going forwards? It's not as good as having an ISO 17020 based scheme for a client's inspector, but it would be better. I just don't know whether well, we wait and see how construction products regs and everything unfolds, as to whether there's anything written in any of the stuff that mandates a greater level of inspection, and whose responsibility that's written onto. And so that takes me finally to poll question 4, which is along those lines. Who do you think should be responsible for the performance of a PFP installation? And I'm being nasty. It's who's the most responsible for the performance of a PFP installation system? Who's the one that should pay the biggest heed of this and the greatest level of responsibility? And Here we go. The interesting that the installer is the most, and the installer has the biggest burden. The building owner has, building owner comes second. I'm glad to see that building control doesn't get yet. That there's a lot of sense in those answers. I say it will be interesting to see. I would like to see the building. I would like to see either say the easy way to do it would be an owner sponsored, would be an owner led scheme. But other than that, there could be all sorts of different ways that all this unfolds. So that's the end of it. It takes me to there's lots of things that we can look forward to in 2024. The biggest thing I think that we can look forward to in the first half of the year is some new construction products regulations. But from our ASFP standpoint, we're going to continue to develop our competency pathway. We're going to push hard on the minimum standards of minimum requirements for certification. There'll be a number of new and updated publications, and obviously we're going to continue to develop industry guidance. And with that, I would say thank you very much for listening. It gets me to me Q&A, and I've only got 3 here at the moment. So a simple one there. If ABCP System 1 was mandatory, would that mean fire resistance testing on sample products by the conformity assessment body? It would certainly mean some form of testing. I might not mean we could write it so it might not be a full-blown fire resistance test or a full-scale fire resistance test, but it may well be that we could write something in there in terms of what we were doing. If it's the European system, yes, it's a fire resistance test. Okay, in terms of I've got I'll do the simple one while I'm reading the complicated one. So a simple one was does ASFP membership denote design competence for PFP? At the moment, no, it doesn't, because ASFP members could come from a number of different places, you know, manufacturers, installers, test labs, certification bodies, and associate members. So not everybody that was within our membership is responsible for or competent to design PFP, but certainly there will be design competent people PFP with it on PFP at the moment, and as the framework goes forwards, then ultimately we will be able to have people who can show design competence for their particular PFP families going forwards. There's a question there. There's a question about steel framing and lightweight roof, and there is one of the things that we are looking at the moment for an advisory note is looking at structural steel that passes like across a partition and across a compartment line, as well as one that sits within a compartment line. So we're trying to do that and trying to pull guidance together on those sorts of things going forwards. Advanced and authoritative competencies under design and specify appear to relate to the work of a fire engineer. Will there be any further competencies for architects and technicians? When we look at the competencies within there, they fit the answer. They're going to fit the activity. So it's the activity. It's not necessarily a particular person. If you are doing an activity, then that's the competence meets that. I would take that on that. I would suggest on that basis, rather than competencies for architects or architectural technicians. It will be how you are doing, what you are doing, and whether you're working at advanced and authoritative level. When do we expect the competency pathway to become mandatory? The answer is different activities will get rolled out at a different timescale. It won't necessarily become mandatory, but if you want the pass mark, it will be mandatory as part of that. And then at some point beyond that, it may well become mandatory. But that's it. There's a long way to go on that. There's a lot of work to do on that, and we aren't going to start making it mandatory until it's been up and running for I would suggest a number of years. Do we expect to eventually see an increase in the number of test standards for manufacturers to test to when moving to an EM way of working rather than relying to? That's a really interesting question about test methods. I know one of the challenges is that our construction industry adopts and innovates and moves forwards very, very quickly. And because they're moving forwards but much faster than the test standards, for those of us who get involved, writing EN standards is incredibly slow and laborious and takes an awful long time, because you have to bring the whole of Europe with you. I would suggest that there is an element of the fact that what we're actually trying to do is write a piece of guidance to help people understand when using an ad hoc test whether that ad hoc test is appropriate and has the right levels of rigor behind it. And that's a piece of work that Stuart and I are in the middle of, and probably going to be talking about this afternoon, Stuart, just so you know. And then last, I've got two that's just landed. Not members of ASFP. How do we get access to the codes, the guides, the notes, without paying the? It says hefty membership fees. What I would say is, I think apart of all the advisory notes and maybe even the colour books are now free to access on the website. There is a publication section, so have a look on the website at the information. Equally, there is levels of the membership. It's not exactly. I wouldn't describe it as hefty. It's significantly cheaper than a fire test or anything like that. But there you go. And then should we I will do last question and then we'll crack on. Should we be concerned about incompatibility of testing, i.e. EN tested petitions incorporated BS tested doors? It's a really good question. I'm maybe not so bothered about it, but it's about making sure that the appropriate detail is there. And if you're adding stuff to an EN tested petition, BS tested door, how does the interactions between the petition and the door test, and the petition test is more important than necessarily the EN versus BS. It's how the two come together and the interface between the two that's far more important. Right, we're 5 minutes over, so I'll just canter through this last little bit. As a reminder, we have a CPD. There again is your info at asfp.org.uk. If you want a CPD certificate, and we'll sort them out. I would be remiss of me and I get shouted at in the office if I didn't mention the fact that this year's regional seminar is in Bristol. It's on the 12th of March, and we're doing design and install again. It's the next iteration of the one we did in Leeds last year. There's a QR code there, scan that or revisit it, have a look it's on the ASFP website if you want to know more about what we're doing with really good speakers at that. On the 11th of April, we've got our AGM, and I'm hoping that we will have at least a speaker from DLUC to come along and talk to us about those new construction products regulations, if all goes according to my grand plan. And I love it when a plan comes together. We'll have that hopefully at that event, Thursday the 11th of April in London, the Drapers Hall. It does look rather grand, that, doesn't it? And then beyond that, Life on the Ocean Wave, we've got our ASFP Regatta Challenge, a day of networking and a chance to spend some time out on the water on the in the Solent, and that will take place on the 19th of June. A number of people who signed up for it last year have already come back and signed up for it. I think there are a few spaces left, I think. Again, contact the office if you want to know more. All right. It's an excellent day of team building. I couldn't recommend it enough. Okay. And without that, I'll say thank you very much for attending. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. Our next webinar is on the 27th of March, and as a heads up, it's going to be our friends from Consult doing a webinar about the insurance landscape. But for the meantime, thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.